It was only about 5 or 10 minutes that we were on last time, about 10 minutes. Uh, okay, so um, the story of the Buddha, I think in the West got garbled with a story that he told about, let us say, a prince leaving the palace because he was cloistered there. And when he left, he saw an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a monk. And that was the motivation for Siddhartha leaving the, uh, the house, and that he snuck out at night.
It's the only story I've ever heard for the Buddha.
Okay, that's not the case. That's
Holy
not
moly.
true. According to Dr. Ambakar, who was, he's possibly the most famous um, Indian associated with Buddhism. In fact, he was the one that helped bring Buddhism back. But before he started, uh, let us say, the expansion of Buddha in is actually in Maharashtra state, um, where I had spent so much time. That he was a scholar, that the Indians within old Indian literature has been kept around for a long time, and that the Indians in their universities have as much love for Indian history as the British have for theirs at Oxford and Cambridge and whatnot. Okay. And so an example of that is that at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, the scholars and historians in England, they basically know by name everybody who was there, what had happened, who was involved with it, um, and all of the details about that. So the same thing is kind of true about Indian history. So the alternate story is that due to flooding and a river changing its course, uh, how the land was divided up between the Sakyans and other groups um, required renegotiations on boundaries, because the area that had was changed. In other words, if the river is the boundary, when the boundary changed, who gets the land that was
Okay.
inside that the boundaries. And not only that, but there was a great famine at that time, and that the Sakians got wiped out. They didn't have enough food, and the question was, what about the water, and who's going to get the water to plant? And so that was the kind of political situation that was involved, and that Siddhartha, in fact, wanted the Sakyans to negotiate, but that the old hardcore Sakyans wanted to go to war. And so it was because he was voted down. He was already a fairly high political in within the aristocracy. His dad was, in fact, we call him a king, but in fact he was elected to a 20-year office.
Hmm.
Okay, so they were very wealthy, and that was the reason that Gautama left, was because he was defeated in politics over a war, because he didn't want to go to war, and he was making a big deal out of it. So basically, he left for warmer climes, because this is around Lumpini, which is up actually in Nepal. And so when he left, it was only his wife who he didn't tell. When he said goodbye to his mom and dad, it was a big deal. It was a big farewell. His dad was very sad about all of this happening, because his father was involved with the politics. When he left with 5 people, including a horse and a groom for the horse. In other words,
Okay.
this was well planned out. This was not him sneaking off someplace. This is a well-known story. In fact, we even know the name of the groom, Chanda. After a while, they let the horse go.
Oh, we're just slamming doors.
Let it be wild. So this is the story of the Buddha. After he became awakened, he came back home, and that his wife had been living a fairly pious life in seclusion and whatnot. But she made it, for her, a fairly interesting, tragic mistake. When she heard that her husband had come home, she told her son, who was at that age about 6 or 7, because he either left right as she was giving birth or within a week after. We're not sure about how old the baby was, but it was a brand new baby. And so she told the kid to go get your inheritance from your father. Now, in fact, she had already come from a wealthy family, and not only that, but she got good support from her father and her father-in-law. So she had no problems for support. Normally, when we think of a husband leaving his wife, he leaves her in destitution. No, he left her as a very, very wealthy, high-quality person, but she still resented it. So she said to him, "Go get your inheritance from your father." Well, guess what then? We've got a 7-year-old monk now.
Right.
He took his son. He accepted the duty. And he took his son. He gave the son a new name, Rahula. And Rahula actually means a fetter or a rope or a bondage.
Oh.
Or maybe even a leash, having a dog on a leash. And so that's the name that he gave Rahula. Now, in just a few years after that, his wife, the aunt who raised him, and his father all ordained, leaving the family's business in the hands for about 20 years. And then he left and became the Buddha's attendant. So basically, his whole family, all ordained. So when this Zen monk says you've got to renounce beginning, that no, you don't, family, but your relationship changes completely.
I'm very curious about that because you know, in our last video, and thank you for recording that because I really couldn't understand a lot of what you were saying, so it was good to be able to hear it. You know, you talked about how we pull away from the things of the world, but we have the right view about it, and we don't, you know, get messed up about it. And you know, with my motivation for wanting to do this is you know, I want to enjoy life, right? I want to be happier. I want to be less crazy. I want to be a better person. You know, I don't really care about enlightenment per se or gaining any special knowledge. Apparently, gaining special knowledge is part of the path, but whatever, right?
Being happy and living a happy life sounds pretty special.
Right?
I don't know of any people, or very, very rarely you find someone who is naturally happy.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps 1 in 10 million, 1 in 100 million, something like that. The rest of us have to train for it.
And with you know, with the way the world is going, I feel passionate about wanting to help and wanting to be involved. And you know, when you in the very, very superficial look I've had at some of the scriptures, you know, in the Buddhist path, they talk about retreat, renunciation, and all that. So, what is involvement with your family, with the world, with the rest of it in this path?
Okay, perhaps I should tell you the story then about how a typical young monk in Thailand, and in fact, we could take it back a ways in time because now Thailand has a fairly, let us call it at least for the people, adequate primary education. But now, even in Cambodia, because of the war, they still don't have a very adequate education system, or at least in that time. So, the time is 2002. The place where I was in Bantamburg, which is a city in Cambodia. And that Bantamburg has a particular Wat that's not unusual in Cambodia now, nor was it unusual in Thailand 100 years ago. In that Wat was actually a school, and that all of the students dressed in robes, they all lived there in dormitories, and that at breakfast time they all lined up right in front of the house that I was staying in. I wasn't staying actually at that monastery, but rather as a guest of one of the primary supporters of this Wat. And this Wat was a school with hundreds and hundreds of students. And every morning at 6 a.m., the students would come out and line up in size order because they'd been doing this. I mean, they knew exactly where in line they belonged according to how tall they were. And then they would set out with one of the teachers who was actually fully ordained monk. Now, many of these boys were in fact not orphans. This is not an orphanage. This is basically a school, but that all of the little boys are ordained. And that they line up in these lines so that at breakfast time, the head of that line, or the teacher, will then take his particular group of boys into the neighborhood where they grew up, where their families live, so that every morning mommy gets to see Junior.
Change it from verse 2 to
Every morning, the moms are all out there inspecting not only her own son, but all of the other boys that are in this, because they basically all come from the same neighborhood in this group. That's how the pendabat is arranged, so that the boys go back to the neighborhood, so mom can see them every day. So if the kid's sick, mom can see it. If he's smiling, she can see it.
Right.
Moms, in fact, take care of their boys, even though they are ordained monks. The family relationship and the relationship between the guys in the Wat and the community is very strong.
Okay.
There is also the tradition that almost every young man will ordain for a certain period of time, and the most ideal would be 2 years. And then after 2 years, he returns to lay life. And in that lay life, he not only is supporting his family, but he continues to support that temple, because after all, he's got friends in that temple. It's the local neighborhood temple, and it's full of old uncles, and it's also possibly a retirement community. Also, the typical village Wat is also the dog pound. So that stray dogs in the city or the town always wind up at the Wat, because that's where they can get fed, the leftovers. Okay, so it's a community place. So then when the man gets older and it's time for his own retirement and he hands his business off to his son, he will go back to the Wat and retire there Sometimes even the wife will also build a kuti in the women's section of the wat. Now live at the, which is just more reasons why the family goes to the wat. And so the wat becomes an integral part of the community.
Beautiful.
It's really hard to see renunciation in there. And yet there is, because the boy renounced enough of the family, because he's not living with the family, he's in the wat.
Okay.
And that wats are generally of two types. One is the city wat, and the other one is the forest wat. And that this has been true all over wherever Buddhism happens. It happens with the idea that the city wat, or the wat in the village, has responsibilities to the community.
Okay.
But that every one of the monks who live in that village wat will spend time in the beginning, a long amount of time out in the forest. And it's in the forest that they go into deep seclusion. Kind of with the idea that after the introduction period of time where the boys still are under the mom's control or thumb, but after he's about an age of 20, after he's got a lot of experience of being a monk, that's when he goes off to the forest. And he'll stay there for perhaps years, because we don't want, let us say, if old ladies come with emotional problems or whatever like that, you only want her to be advised by old senior monks.
Okay.
Not by junior monks. And so the junior monks in their intermediate years, from like 2 to 10 years or so, should spend their time in the forest, not in the city, not in the
Right.
city, because the city wat is much more dangerous.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we don't have the benefit of teachers, which is why it's so amazing that you do. I mean, we do and we don't. They're much scarcer on the ground, and it was
Let us put it
10
this
or
way.
12.
People who are seeking the Dhamma seek it in the wrong places, just like the song, because everybody is looking for love in all the wrong places. And so naturally, when they start looking for the Dhamma, they're looking in all the wrong places for it. Where do they look? They look in magazines like Tricycle or Shambhala or Lion's Roar. They buy books at a bookstore, and that they hear and read about advertisements of retreats that are, let us say, pricey. And so in that regard, the people who are in the West, who are living a Western life, when they look at the Dhamma, they don't look at it through Asian eyes, they look at it through Western eyes, and therefore Western Buddhism caters to the Western market. But there are a large number of teachers who are good teachers who are available. I'm not going to spend too much time with it, but no doubt you've probably heard the name Ajahn Chah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ajahn Chah now has, after all of these years, starting from the 1970s, has quite a cadre built up. The two that I would on Samedo are to find nowadays, because he's a really old monk and he's decided to retire back to Wat Pah, and Ajahn Amaro. Those are Ajahn Amaro. Ajahn Pisano is also a good.
Okay. I'm just going to get a pen and paper. Be right back.
Okay. You don't need to.
Yeah, I think I read a book on the Paramitas by Samedo. Um,
Okay.
okay,
So these
Samedo.
monks that I'm mentioning are all Western and also part of the lineage that I was a member of. Okay, so you also have Santikaro, who was 18 years a monk, and others, um, some of them more secure. A really good example would be Achan Dhammavitu. But unfortunately, he lives a whole lot closer to me than he does to you. He's only about 20 miles from here. But he's the one who teaches at Deepapawan, and he's
Okay.
English. He was ordained in the same year that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa died, which was 1993. And so he's a good friend of mine. And if you have a chance to do a retreat with him, that would be a good place to do it. Also, there is one named Bhante Vilamaramsi, who has more connection with Sri Lanka, but he's a worthwhile teacher.
Okay, you've given a few names. I have Samedo, Villamaramsi, Pasano.
Pisano, Achan Pisano. Achan Pisano was the abbot of what Pa Nanachat for many years.
Which is the one that...
of Udon Ratchasima. That was the one that Achan Cha founded. And Achan Cha Wat is Wat Pabong, also in that area, which is where where Achan Samedo is occasionally cited.
Okay.
Okay. There is also the possibility that I came across. I was actually living in the United States, mostly in North Carolina, for about 8 years as a monk. And I really learned all about the Sangha in the United States. Perhaps to tell the story would be that when I first understood Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa teaching and got a load of it, I put way too much emphasis and effort on how marvelous Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is that he was actually able to figure out what the Buddha was teaching.
Okay.
Okay. Then it began to dawn on me through various things that Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was in fact a member of a deeper club that was well known in Thailand, that actually has connections right into the royal family. And that the Noble Dhamma is and has always been a lot, well, I don't know what the word always means here, but for centuries has been alive and well in Thailand, but has been, let us say, secreted away, most likely in the forest traditions, to where in the city Wat, they catered to the people more, which meant that there was a whole lot more magical thinking. And so the magical part of Buddhism is in the city Wats, to where it's the forest Wats and others that have maintained the noble Dhamma. But when I got to the United States, a particular interesting thing happened, and that is that I began to make friends in the Lao community, and there was one young Lao monk who had recently ordained. He was born in the United States. He spoke perfect English, but he did not speak Lao all that well, but he was okay with it. He was about with Lao where I am with Thai. And that he ordained primarily to take care of an uncle who had ordained after he retired at the age of 65. So we have a daddy, and a son, which was the nephew of one monk. But then there was also the most elder of these um, uh, brothers, who was one. Let us call it this. He was the second most important Laotian monk in the United States after Achan Bunmi. Bunmi was at that time was staying in Washington, D.C., at Wat Lao, Washington. And Achan Main was in Colorado, in Denver. So when I started teaching Dhamma in English to this young boy, he rats on me to his uncle, who rats on me to the older uncle that basically summoned me to Colorado. And so we get in the car, all three of us, the young monk, the new retired monk, and we set out and we go to Colorado. They were, by the way, at a temple called High Point, and I eventually moved in with them. But Achan Main in Colorado wanted to see me because he was blown away that a Westerner, of all things, would know the noble Dhamma, because it's been kept secret. And so I became part then of the inner group of the Lao Circle as well, and did a lot of traveling around. I've probably been in 30 different Laotian Wats, but also because of my connection with his name is Mahasamsak. Mahasamsak was raised in Surin, so he knew and was quite excellent in the Cambodian language, though he was Thai. And it was he that I was staying with in North Carolina at Wat Greensboro, because he was the one who I had a connection through with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Also had connections at Chicago Wat. In fact, Virasak, Achan Virasak Viradamo, who was the abbot of the Wat in Chicago, we knew each other years before at Wat So and Mo. Okay, so my choice was to stay in Chicago or to stay in Wat Greensboro, and I chose Wat Greensboro to stay because it was close to my mother, who lived in Waxhaw, North Carolina. And so when I was there, then I was also somewhat a part of the Cambodian community and went to other Cambodian Wats and find that there's nobles within the Cambodian tradition. So here we have now noble Thai monks, noble Laotian monks, and noble Khmer monks from Cambodia, who had all trained in their own tradition and then been brought to the United States by the lay people who had been refugees from the Vietnamese War. There was also a huge number of Vietnamese, and so we worked basically together. One of the things we worked together on was celebrations and having interconnections and whatnot, but also funerals. Because people were dying a lot, and they didn't have enough monks to go around. And so we shared that connection. So for that reason, the tradition in the United States was very, very much like the tradition in Thailand and in other places, and that is that monks move around from temple to temple, from wat to wat, and then they'll choose which one they stay at for Panza for the 3 months. And that's all. Come and spend your vasa at our wat. Okay, so that's, but other than that, the monks after 5 years are fairly free to move around. So I was basically hanging out a lot with Laotians. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that those monks who know the noble Dhamma have now spread out all over the place, but they are almost cloistered because one, the Westerners do not seek these monks out. They would rather go to someone that is advertising in English, who speaks English, and is actually part of the community, in the sense that they would rather pay another layman money to learn the Dhamma than to learn it from the ones who actually know the Dhamma.
Well, I mean, it's a big reason I'm talking to you is that, you know, we're both Westerners. You've put yourself forward in a way where, you know, even though you have all this lifetime of experience and stuff, this feels very egalitarian. Almost makes me nervous. It feels so egalitarian.
They're done that. Okay, so that's a point. We can come to that also. That Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was very big on spreading the noble Dhamma. That how he became so famous in Thailand, possibly the most famous of all the monks of Thailand to the Thai people. But for some reason, it didn't get to the West. Most of the Westerners who would come to Wat Soan Mok, who actually wanted to ordain, would be sent to Wat Panatachat. And so all of the monks that are Western monks that are known are generally from Wat Panatachat. But there's a few. Rodney Bucknell and Christopher Titmus are students of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. So they're worthy also. And Santikaro, who kept his Pali name, but he just wrote, I think, 2002, 2004, something in that time frame, after 18 years as a monk, and he was Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's translator. Okay, so we do have Westerners that are associated with the Noble Dhamma, and Ajahn Sumedho is probably the shining example of it. But most of the people who were teaching the Dhamma in the West did not stay in an Asian temple long enough to get into the inner core.
The inner core.
Yeah, that like Jack Cornfield, for instance, only spent about 2 years, and in that case, he spent it in more than one place, so he never really got settled into the Dhamma. So naturally, when he goes back to the West, he didn't go back as a monk, he went back as a psychologist. And that's the beginning of Spirit Rock. That's where all the money problems have come from, was Jack. I will lay that at his feet, and his friend Joseph Goldstein. They have destroyed the possibility of real Dhamma coming to the West by selling what they had rather than learning what they need to learn.
Okay, this is very interesting. I mean, I've listened to Goldstein. I've read Cornfield. I've thought about going to Spirit Rock. All of these different things, and you know, kind of a two-pronged question here. You know, what's missing in what's happened in the West, and also like when you talk about the Noble Dhamma, I watched an interview of yours, and you said something, you know, to use your phrase, that rung my bell. You talked about the magic, and you know, for me, and I mean no offense if this is anything that is offensive, whatever. Like for me, like my first encounter with Buddhism was pretty no nonsense. Meditation helped me a lot, and then I found out about a lot of the the supernatural beliefs, and for me, it felt like a cloud of flies around a live body.
Well, that's what magical thinking is, except that those flies are actually desires. The flies actually want that body to be dead so they can eat it. But they can't eat it because it swats them away. But that's also thinking of the flies as our own desires And one of the things that people will desire is enlightenment, which is the Buddha talks about that wanting things we don't have is a form of suffering. And when we want something that we don't have, we become a preta, or a hungry ghost that cannot get what he wants. Okay, so we're stuck in a state of desire. Other people who believe in rebirth and reincarnation, they only do it up to a point, and they still want proof. So now their meditation practice becomes trying to get into a state so that they can prove to themselves that rebirth and reincarnation exist. They want to have reincarnation experiences. So those students then will flock to those teachers who have said, I have had an experience, or I did on this day, I had this happen, and so I've got this now. Okay, so that's part of the magic, is for teachers to tell magic just so that they can attract those who want the magic. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa decided to break down that boundary between ordinary village Buddhism that was full of magic and ritual and the forest monastery tradition of the noble Dhamma. And he started to teach that openly, and because of that, he got into a lot of trouble. And the trouble became a Sangha Dasesa, which was they accused him of causing dissension within the Sangha. But what that, this was actually in Bangkok, and it became a big, big deal. This was about, there was a lot of politics going on at the same time, which changed Thailand into a constitutional monarchy. And so there were factions of politicals that were politicizing this trial that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was going through that took months. But part of the trial was that there was a major literature search done. Was Bhikkhu Buddhadasa teaching correct Dhamma, or was he causing dissension within the Sangha? Because some of those on the Sangha Dasesa requires 20 monks. Some of those 20 monks were his accusers, and some of those 20 monks were his defenders.
Yeah.
And so through that process, he became a very, very well-known big face. And the outcome of this trial was he's teaching the wrong thing, he's teaching the right thing to the wrong people.
Wrong people.
He's teaching the right thing to the wrong people. What's he doing? He's teaching the real Dhamma to those who should be staying in the level of magic, the Buddhist religion.
Yeah.
Okay. But he also made a lot of friends, and one of those friends happened to have been the Samdet Sangharaj, the most important monk in Thailand at that time, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa became a student of his. And so now that's the connection into that royal lineage that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has, as well as the noble. And so this was the lineage that I was in without knowing all of the details and all the facts. Do not understand that this is a big deal. This is not something little Bhikkhu Buddhadasa making a big noise. This was the actual Sangha itself beginning to wake up and to roar. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's point was that now is the time to let the noble supramundane Dhamma out to the world. And that his term was to do it in Thailand, in the Thai language, hoping that enough Westerners would understand it so that we can start spreading it. Now, I didn't talk to you very much about Achan Po. Achan Po was, or still is, in fact, he's 87, and he's staying at the same Deepa Bhawan as Adama Bitu. They're on the other island over on Koh Samui. And so Achan Po is actually my Achan. During my ordination,
Did you
there's
take it or
two
me?
major uh, uh, jobs for monks to do, the Achan and the Upajjhaya. My Upajjhaya was actually the Sumdat Sangha of South Thailand. That was the connection that we had, that the most senior monk of South Thailand, and they only have 6 of them in Thailand. And so one of the 6 patriarchs of Thailand was my Upajjhaya, and my Achan is Achan Po. So my relationship to Achan Po had been very close my whole life since that time. I would say that he is the one person that I am closer to than anyone else in my life.
I love the story in the interview I saw where he would stand outside your kuti just to let you know that you were supported. I thought that was such a beautiful, very beautiful, like demonstration of spiritual friendship.
Uh-huh. Another way of looking at it is that was Achan Po's Zen stick. You see in the Zen, you see in the Zen system, the stick is used to wake up the student. Achan Po would merely show up to see how long it took me to wake up to the fact that he's out there. Now that expanded awareness for me it's got marvelous qualities to it. One of the things that just continue to blow me away is that when people come onto this property, I know it before the dogs do. And I know who it is. And especially if it's one that I know, one of my family, when they come, I know it. They barely get on the property before I know they're there.
Where
so it's a matter of like, go ahead.
In the absence of any sensory information?
Who knows? I don't know. My hearing is not good enough to detect the difference between, let us say, a diesel truck and a regular car, but you do have different sounds in motorbikes, but I don't hear that anyway.
Yeah.
That if there's any recognition, it would be that when I first get sight of the truck, that just proves to me that I was right. That before I see the truck rounding the corner, before the truck even gets into the driveway, I know it's there.
That's pretty cool. And cool if that happens. Also kind of beside the point.
Yes, but it's the same quality of wakefulness that allows us to see serendipity or synchronicity. It allows us to get a really, really good, deep connection with our environment.
Okay, serendipity is a theme in my life right now, and it's not something I think of with Buddhism. What are you getting at?
Wakefulness.
Yeah. I guess we'll talk more about that.
Waking up.
But serendipity, where does serendipity and synchronicity come? I mean, I guess for me, like right now, I'm doing 12-step stuff, and
here is some of the occasions when it will happen.
Okay.
I will make an example of something as a task that people don't normally like to do, but we can turn it into a joy. And I use dishwashing. And then the student immediately, with a great big smile on his face, saying, "I'm employed as a dishwasher. How did you know?" Okay.
Yeah.
Another example with one of my students is that I mentioned a particular song. And she says, "That song is still sitting right there on the record player." She had an old record player. And there it is. I mean, she was just listening to it. Last thing she listened to, and here I am talking about that song. These are the kinds of things that happen. The kinds of things that happen often enough that we begin to think that magic actually exists. No, it's just coincidences, but you'd be surprised at how many coincidental things happen. It's mind blowing.
Well, I mean, you messaged me back the second after I had that beautiful experience the other day. Just,
See, I told you.
yeah. So what do you make of it?
I don't. I just
Don't.
enjoy it.
Right. Good call.
Don't make anything of it because we can't control it. We can just experience it and enjoy it.
Okay, lack of control. There's an interesting one. It's a big theme in 12-step fellowships and something that's been helping me a lot. And in one of the books I'm reading, they point out, you're not in control in your mind. You're just along for the ride. So
Well, Anapanasati actually, a way that we practice it, and the way that the Buddha taught it, and especially the way that Goenka teaches it, is that the students get a full load of that right away. That you are in fact not in control of your mind. And how we do that?
Anapanasati is breathing, right?
Right. So mindfulness of breathing, and now the mind wanders away. Why, if you had control of your mind and you thought you were going to watch your breathing, then why aren't you watching it? The answer is your mind's out of control, and you didn't know that, but now you can actually see it.
Okay, but then you can respond once you've come back. So like I feel like and I'm sure I feel like I'm in there somewhere, right? And if I'm not, then how can I do the work? The yeah.
There is the working, but no worker is needed. Just like there is walking, but no walker is needed. In fact, walking is so natural that it doesn't even require a walker. It's an automatic kind of thing that goes on.
So are we talking about determinism here? Like it'll all just happen?
I don't know that word. That sounds like Western philosophy based in Christianity, and I don't know nothing about that stuff. Intentionally so.
Yeah. What I guess this is one of those like special knowledge theory things about Buddhism that it's like, okay, I'm kind of curious why you think it. It seems really different from my experience. How does it help? What's the deal? I just want to be happy. Why do I have to stop thinking about, myself as myself?
Because yourself is a source of pain. An example of that is when someone calls a name, we feel threatened. Where in fact, being called a name is not threatening. When I was a child, I learned the phrase, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words can never hurt me. But it took me years to figure out that was true. The sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you, and yet we feel hurt by words a lot. Why? Because it's the self that's being attacked. And we feel defensive because we're trying to defend the self that doesn't really need to be defended at all. And not only that, but the whole quality of self is kind of confusing for the Westerner because the translators, who, by the way, Riles Davies and I.B. Honer and Crispus Humphreys and the crowd way back when, were Christians, and that the language that they used is Christian language, and it seems that the one word that they avoided that was Christian that did apply was the word soul. anatta basically means no soul. Now, what do we mean by no soul? Is that there is no enduring thing that's going to be strong enough to survive death. That if you're going to clean up your act, you got to do it now. You can't wait until you're reborn as something way off in the future. But clinging to the self means that we're clinging to life. We want to not die. And so it's very comforting to many people to say, oh, well, after you die, you'll go to heaven. After you die, you'll meet all of the people that that you knew in life. That now that mom is dead, it's okay because her daughter is there in heaven waiting for her. So it's a type of comfort. Buddhism is much more a big smile, a friendly nod, and say, hey, man, you're dying. Get over it. You're dead. You're about to die. Can you die happily? Or are you going to die in longing, hoping to see some dead people? So the idea of a soul is what the Buddha taught against. And in that regard, what is ever that there is a self is then not permanent. It's temporary. And it arises at just the wrong time. In fact, when we are reborn, we are born in a state of wanting things. We're reborn into a state of anger. I am angry. We're born in a state of fear. We're born in the state of being a dumb animal, of going along to getting along. We do what we're told to do, either hoping for a reward later or not expecting any reward at all, and then we resent it. Most people spend most of their time in an animal state, going along to getting along. We then occasionally go into states of anger. We go into state of wanting things, and we go into states of fear. These are what is called the woeful states, and these are also the states that the Hindus and Brahmins had as the other worlds. But in fact, we go into these other worlds, and it's the self that takes us into these other worlds.
There's a guy right up there.
These other worlds then are the woeful states of hell, the ghostly world of wanting things, the Asuras, which are heavenly warriors that are afraid. Their whole point is that they're afraid to fight, and the animal world of being controlled. And we'll talk about these woeful states later and how they connect directly to our instincts and how these are the outcome of the four modes of clinging. So this is fairly deep Buddhism that we're in right from the very beginning, but you asked the question about no self. The answer is that self that we're talking about is in fact the vehicle for the suffering. Or that's the house builder that builds the house of dukkha. Or it's the bucket that our suffering is carried in. If there is no container for suffering or no container for dissatisfaction, then where is the satisfaction or where is the dissatisfaction?
So, like, is it kind of a tactic, a way of looking at things, a helpful perspective, the whole thing of no self?
Yes, precisely so. We could go so far as to say it's all a matter of right view, using right sati and right effort to develop a right attitude. And everything then about life is having the right attitude for it. And the wrong attitude is, this is mine. There's the self. This is mine. Ownership creates the self.
When I had that experience of feeling less alienated from everything around me after meditation, the exact way that it feels, like, sure, I feel like I'm more part of everything. I don't feel so estranged from it, but at the same time, it feels like everything is mine. Like, that's exactly how it feels. Like,
Not mine in the sense of ownership, but mine in the sense of community.
you could put it that way. Go on. I'm interested in what you're saying.
Okay, well, let's use this analogy like that is that the average churchgoer, when he thinks of my church, he thinks of it as his community and his collection of friends and things like this. But your average preacher, when he thinks of my church, he thinks that it actually belongs to him.
Mm-hmm.
That this is
Okay,
mine.
let me sit with that for a second, please. I love a good metaphor. I'm gonna write that one down.
Okay. So you see then, if Cousin Susie doesn't show up at church, then that's okay with me because all these other people are there. But to the preacher, that's lost income. Susie didn't come to church. I wonder why. Okay. So now he becomes personally involved. It's that personal involvement that is the self that becomes personally involved. And the teaching of the Buddha is to recognize the way things are. And the way things are is, in fact, that congregation does not belong to that preacher. That's a delusion on his part. And the delusion comes home really strongly when he gets caught with his hand in the plate, which happens on a regular basis. Okay, so now basically what we need to look at in that regard is going to the instincts and thinking about the self-preservation instinct. There is something instinctual within all of life form that has the quality of wanting to maintain that life, self-preservation, to preserve being alive. That self-preservation, when it is well trained and well understood, is actually quite a valuable resource. But when it's untrained, not well understood, then it becomes the boss. And the boss then makes people afraid. So when someone says words, we feel harmed by those words, when in fact, that's just an attack upon a self, but it's not a real attack. Then in fact, two people can be called the same thing, and both of them have completely different reactions to it based upon their level of attachment. So if one's an old college professor that has been tenured for many years, he's had lots of publications, and he's standing beside a young professor that's just gotten his PhD, and a student walks up to both of them and says, "You two are a bunch of terrible teachers. I hate you both," and walks off. The younger one is going to feel really bad. Those words hit him like sticks and stones. But the old professor, who knows what he knows and knows who he is, he's not affected by that. He's not going to. Okay, so you're seeing what I'm talking about. That the younger one thought that he needed to be protected, so he was giving power to those words because they were dangerous to him.
I mean, the phrase that's standing out from that is, and maybe I'm just getting too caught up in the metaphor, was he knows, the older one, he knows who he is, or maybe generalize that, he knows how things are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now let's look at this self-preservation instinct, which has kept humanity alive and kept us alive even before we were humans. That self-preservation instinct has a mechanism, and that mechanism is to alert us or to wake us up using fear. And that fear is actually a set of chemicals. And so when the reptilian brain, that is the self-preservation instinct, feels threatened, it puts us on alert. And we go into a state of freeze followed by flight or fright. We get ready for danger. Okay. So let me ask you this. Do you understand what I mean? Do you feel that there's danger around sometimes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's put our real thinking hat on, our real wisdom. Have you actually been in danger in the past year or two?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
But not often, not much, not real
Uh,
danger. Perceived
no,
danger,
no,
but
not
not
often.
real danger.
Not,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I'm getting at. Okay, so that ratio between dealing with real danger on a infrequent occasion is the actual value of the self-preservation instinct.
Okay.
But it goes off too often, so that we're feeling that we're in a state of fear and a state of danger in times when it's not appropriate to be in a state of fear or danger.
All the time. All the time. Yeah.
So now you're getting at what we're going on with. This is basically what we mean by then is when we recognize that there really in this moment is no self that needs to be protected. That way we don't have to go into a bit of danger because there's really no danger there. The danger was perceived, it wasn't actual.
Okay. But a lot of the I'm just trying to understand, not argue. A lot of the um, stuff that puts me into that there's danger mode um, is stuff that is going to lead to non-lethal, non-physical, sometimes physical, I guess, suffering, right? You know, that it's going to be embarrassing or it's going to be, you name it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not imaginary problems. Um,
But most of our problems are imaginary simply because we have an imagination. Let us think of that imagination that we're talking about is, in fact, something that the Buddha knew about and that he had a word for it. This imagination, think of it or imagine it as to be a projector screen like in a movie theater. And that the quality of the imagination that we have, which is going on inside the mind, is very similar to going to the cinema and watching a movie because the movies themselves want to create the illusion that the action that's on the screen is real, the dialogue that's on the screen is real, that they want the audience to become absorbed in it. But occasionally, someone is going to be in the audience that's not looking at the story and not looking at the events upon the screen. They're looking at how the movie was made. Looking at how the movie was made, beginning to see little telltale things like that window's got no glass in it. Or that period costume that actress is wearing does not fit the actual period.
Okay.
Or that, oh, I see the shadow of a boom mic. And all kinds of little things like this that give us the concept that this is a movie. This is a movie. Keep remembering that this is a movie. And so when you see a girl in a horror movie sneaking down the hall while they're playing really, really high pressure music, everybody in the audience is saying, "Don't go down that hall! Don't go down that hall!" Okay, but the guy who knows that this is only a movie, he's saying, "Okay, how long are they going to play this silly music, and how long is she going to hesitate walking down the hall before she finally opens the door? Right? So this is the way of beginning to look at it, is this imagination that we have is nothing but our own movie that we have made, that we've created for ourselves to entertain ourselves and to freak ourselves out. And that in fact, there is more to life than this movie theater.
Thank God.
There is more to life than this movie theater. And so another way of then understanding it is that the reality that we perceive through our senses is actually only a subset of the actual reality, that the human sensing system does not take in all the information that's out there.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, an example of that is that we cannot hear FM radio music on FM radio because we cannot hear at that frequency range of 20 megahertz. We can't. Our hearing is not that high, so we miss out on all the radio waves. We miss out on all the ultraviolet rays. We miss out on the infrared rays. We miss out on the gamma rays. We miss out on all of that stuff because all we have is the visual area that is only one octave in the Armstrong unit level. That's all we can see. We are missing out on almost everything that happens because our senses are so limited. But not only that, but once the senses get in, they have to be processed. And our processing system is not so great, especially for an infant, because he doesn't have a database to do very good processing. And because of that, the infant, in their ignorance of not understanding how to process stuff, comes up with a lot of wrong information. In other words, that internal screen winds up with a lot of bad movies. But guess what? Now those movies that we have made now get stored away so that they can be replayed later.
Yeah.
And so, and where do they get played? They get played upon this screen of the mind. Now, the screen of the mind actually is trying to mimic our senses. Now, in the Pali, the senses are the atana, and it's the salayatana, which is the internal. In that regard, human beings do not actually interact with the real world. They only can interact with their understanding of that real world that they created in their own mind.
Yep.
So in the real world, there's no me or self there. But once I've created in my own mind, I create my own self along with it.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me think of the way that I've usually heard it described is that, we're not really one cohesive thing. We're a bunch of processes that are in constant dialogue with the world around us.
Mm-hmm. That we're in fact a crowd. We're disorganized. We lie. We have doubts. We want this and then we want that, and we change, etc., like that. So in the concept of the Eightfold Noble Path, one of the qualities on that path is what's called Samaya Samadhi, but that does not mean concentrated mind. What it means is that the mind has become unified. We are no longer a crowd. We become dedicated to. Yes, it's possible. That's the whole point of the teaching of the Buddha. That's the Dhamma, is to stop being a crowd and get your act together.
Because I thought I'd just come to terms with it.
Well, yeah, but you got to get it into a great big pile before you can come to terms with it.
Well, I mean, what I meant by that is I thought I would just come to terms with the fact that there's opposing forces and they fade into the background and you ignore them. No.
No, you bring your mind to a state of one-pointedness or unification of mind.
Is that why you're able to answer? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is that why you're always able to answer questions so quickly? That's something that stands out watching you. You got your answers, and they're good answers.
I'll leave that for you to decide. Been there, done that. Been there, done that. It helps the mind become collected so that the mind becomes unified, it becomes collected. And that an example of that would be a mind that's not unified, would be a mind that's full of doubt. A mind that's not unified will tell lies. A mind that's not unified will want things because it doesn't feel satisfied. But a mind that's unified and collected is satisfied. It already feels whole. It doesn't.
Sold.
Huh?
I'm sold.
Okay. Well, it was a cheap price. You got a bargain. So, in that regard, a unified mind means that it's adequate in and of itself, and it doesn't need anything. Most people feel unwhole. They're missing something. Some even talk about having a hole inside that needs to be filled. And some of them even thinking about it in the sense of the hole is God-shaped. So that all you have to do is plug God into the hole. The reality, though, is that God is the hole shape.
Don't know what that means, but it's a good line.
Right. Well, yes, the God is reshaped to try to fit the hole, but it's always inadequate. So besides God, some will throw a bicycle, others will throw a motorcycle, some of us throw a pocket rocket. Mine was an SL 500. That's a Mercedes, a little pocket rocket, two-seater bomb. Okay. Some people will throw a mansion in, trying to fill that hole. And the hole never gets filled up. We always feel inadequate. We always feel like we're missing something. Mm-hmm. So when we recognize that trying to fill the hole up is not the right way of doing it, what we need to do is start taking things out of the hole, inspecting them, trying to figure out do they belong in there or not. And so we start to clean house. That hole is our house, in fact. It's our cathedral. It's our basilica. And it's better left empty.
That's beautiful.
The cathedral of the mind is best left empty. We don't want to fill it up with houses and junk and cars and Wall Streets and Washington, D.C.s and all that kind of stuff. We want to throw all that stuff out so that we can get it emptied out, because all of that is possessions. And every possession needs a possessor. That possessor is the self. It's the owner. But if you don't own something and you lose it, no big deal. But if you own something and you lose it, now you feel really bad. Oh, I've lost it. I have lost it. There comes the I again. That's the selfishness. And so now we have to look at it in two ways. One is there a permanent self? That permanent self, if it's really permanent, then it's a soul. And it is so permanent that it will survive death. And then there's the other kind of self that's kind of permanent. Let's look at it in this way. It's the distinction between the atheist and the Christians. The atheists say that when you die, you die. That the way that it's expressed in the sutras is upon the breakup of the body, the individual is annihilated. Okay, this is not the teaching of the Buddha. That's the teaching of atheism. In other words, that I'm going to be okay until I die and then I'm dead. The Christian says you ain't dead yet. We're going to pick you up and beat you to death and then roast you. But the but within the atheist idea, they say no, there ain't no God, therefore I'm going to die. But the Buddhists say no, that self that you create is temporary and it's only a vehicle for dissatisfaction. It's that which becomes dissatisfied. And if you live a very satisfied life, you will live it altruistically and unselfishly. And you'll have a marvelous life. But every time you become selfish, then you become guarded and that you're in a state of suffering. Here's an easy example of that. Your brother comes and wants to borrow $500. If you say yes to him, then you'll make him happy and you feel happy too, and brotherly love abounds. But if you say no, I don't have $500 to give you, that means I'm being selfish with that. I may not really have 500, but if I really cared about my brother, I would help him get 500. But since I don't care about him and I care about my money, my wallet is more important to me than my brother, so I'm not going to give him $500. He feels bad, and so do I. That's a clear-cut case right there of selfishness.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's not giving a friend or family member something that they need. We refuse it. Why? Because I'm selfish. I need it too. I need that $500 more than you need that $500. Okay? That is not being generous. That is being selfish. And that selfishness then has caused suffering for both. To where if we give the $500, now both of them are feeling good. The giver and the receiver feels really good about it.
Yeah.
So that's a real clear-cut case of selfishness that arises, but it only arose over the issue of the $500. But in this case, it causes suffering because I'm attached to my $500. And so this is how self arises. It arises not spontaneously, but it arises out of causes and conditions. And those causes and conditions are then generally referred to in the English language word of clinging. And by clinging, there becomes a clingor.
Stop there for a second, please. Sorry. I wanted sometimes need to think about things you're saying. So, I mean, clinging is something that I can definitely identify with. I see it. I can experience not clinging sometimes. I think, and and so, if I hear you correctly, if I overcome clinging, I also lose that sense of self, which of course we're trying to, right?
Okay, we can say it like that. But perhaps another way of saying it is that clinging requires a clingor. The example is my arm. If I'm clinging to the arm, it's not just a hand there. There's the arm and all the attachments all the way back into the controlling part that's actually doing the clinging. That's the self. The self is the clinger.
Okay.
And somewhere in there is a joke from Star Trek about Klingons. You have Klingors, we have clinging and Klingons, okay? Because we keep clinging on and on and on.
Okay.
So that's the self. The self is that which does the clinging. So Bhikkhu Buddhadasa then will have a favorite phrase that he got right out of the Pali, and that is, nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. that the kind of clinging that we could be doing is not selfish clinging, but that we do not want. Here's actually a very good point: is that of the clinging, there is only four kinds of clinging that lead to suffering. There's only four kinds of clinging that create a self that can be dissatisfied. But there are kinds of clinging that are not conducive to the creation of a self or the creation of dissatisfaction. Would you like a short list?
Yes, I always thought that we were trying to get past clinging altogether.
Yeah, which they call attachment also. Lots of jokes, okay? Here's something that's worth attaching to, something worth clinging to, this present moment. Be here now. Another thing that's worth attaching to would be the Four Noble Truths and the teaching of the Buddha. To hang on to that stuff.
Okay.
Because it's liberating.
Yeah.
Okay? There's some freight trains you want to jump on and some freight trains you don't want to jump on. And this is one of the freight trains you want to jump on, is this present moment. That's worth hanging on to. Bringing it up over and over and over again. So there are, in fact, qualities of, in fact, there's a sutta by the name of one fortunate attachment. One fortunate attachment. What is that one fortunate attachment? Today. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but today. Now, in that regard, in the time of the Buddha, they didn't have clocks yet. So they weren't talking about this particular hour or this particular time of day, but they're talking about just right now, just today. That's what is worthy of our attachment, is attached to this present moment. But attachments of self-preservation that lead to fear, attachments that lead to clinging for material possessions, attachments that lead to clinging to views and ideas about who we are and our relationships to the world, and clinging and attachments to the way that things should be done. These are the four modes of clinging. Okay, the clinging to the ways that should be done, you could think of as your entire society, including all the rites, rules, rituals, regulations, social conventions, and the whole 9 yards of it. And Buddha has a word for it called Silabhata Paramasa. And that the scientists will point this as this is the nesting instinct, under the idea that if you don't do what is required of the nest, you'll get thrown out of the nest, and the nest is dangerous when you're out of it, or it's dangerous to be out of the nest, especially at night. Or another way of looking at it is that you've got to follow the herd to be part of the herd, and that the members of the herd that are the most safe are the ones in the middle of the herd. That's the safe place to be. But the ones who are on the outside of the herd, the stragglers, they're in danger. So this is an instinctual thing that comes right out of our deep past, and you could use it in the label of going along to get along.
Okay.
And when we do that, we're then reborn as an animal, a herd animal, doing what we think is best because we're looking for protection. And so we follow the herd. We do what we're told to do. And we'll go into a great deal about this at a later time. Another kind of clinging that we do is clinging to an identity in relationship to others. An example of that would be, I am a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm an independent, I'm a British, I'm a Canadian, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a teacher, I'm an electrician,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an engineer, I'm of this, I'm of that. You can see the self built right into it, that we cling to identities. And so if we cling, for instance, to a political party, all political parties every day have ups and downs, which means I am no longer who I am. I'm not myself. I am now that which follows that the political leaning. So if I'm a Democrat, every time that something happens to the Democrats that's bad, I feel bad because I am Democrat.
Okay, what about like I'm gay? It comes with a lot of stuff that I really don't like, having to be feminine or whatever else, all these different stereotypes. But at the base of that, there's some very like real innate thing, I'm attracted to people of the same gender. So what would this clinging thingy interact with that? How can I see
know
this
all
more?
about it. Okay, so in that regard, no, you're not gay. Gay is a label.
Okay.
No, you're not LGBT. No, you're not queer. No, you're not a fag. Okay, these are all derogatory things that separate us. And that, in fact, it would not be a big deal to you if it had already not been a big deal to the Christians. They're the ones who are making a big deal out of it. That, in fact, there's many places that you can live throughout the world that don't care at all about what you are. It's only, in fact, that you're trying to defend yourself against Christians that you think of yourself as gay. But if you're not trying to defend yourself from something, then you don't have to wear the label.
So where does the label separate from the reality? Like,
If you
I can
cling,
kind of see
if
what
you
you're
cling to
saying.
the label, you'll suffer for it. If you cling to the label, you'll be dissatisfied. If you don't cling to the label, then you can just go enjoy yourself.
Okay. I think I have an inkling. Go on. Thank you.
Yes. So all of the suffering then that's associated with that is because you identify as I am that. I carry the banner of the gays, which means that I have to defend the gay community against the onslaught of tribalism. But if you don't think of yourself as gay, just think of yourself as, you don't even have to think of yourself. That it's not you.
Interesting direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sure it will take a while to comprehend.
It depends upon the way that we practice. And so next time you call, we need to really get into practice. As we talk about practice, we'll begin to put all of this stuff together. And in that regard, let me say it like this, that I'm really not a meditation teacher. I'm not a meditation teacher for several reasons. One is I don't even like the word meditation. That's a Western word.
Okay.
And it has its own meanings to it. The better way of talking about it is anapanasati. We can also call it sita bhavana, which means mental development. And it's actually, the word sita has a whole lot more to do with the emotional part of the brain than anything else. So it could be also called emotional development.
Okay, tell me more. Oh, weird. Why am I having deja vu right now? Anyway, but
All right. So here's where we're going then with this is that I'm not a meditation teacher. I'm a Dhamma teacher.
Yeah.
What I teach is the Dhamma of the Buddha. But I want to teach it in a way so that the actual essence of the teaching can actually be separated from Buddhism, because Buddhism already has a bad rap in the West, primarily because it's not Christian. Okay, that in fact even psychologists have bad raps with the Christians. They don't want any competition, and so in that regard, the actual practice itself and the wisdom itself can be imparted without using the name Buddha or anything about that. But it does, when I'm teaching it, it helps the students, and let us say in your generation, to really understand the concepts, to really understand the actual teaching of the Dhamma, which basically boils down to figuring out how we are dissatisfied, seeing dukkha, and becoming free from it. Dukkha, dukkha nirodha is the teaching of the Buddha, but we could teach dukkha, dukkha nirodha without using any Pali or even mentioning the Buddha. But when we do and bring all of those things together with all of the history, it makes such a profound connection that, of course, this is what he was teaching. This is what people have been following for 25 centuries now. This is the real essence of life, and that it was found a long time ago, but that it's still quite germane today. That part of the reason why we call the Four Noble Truths noble is because they were noble in the time of the Buddha, have been noble all along, and continue to be noble right to today. But that the actual teaching then of the Buddha is that which is being taught, even if we took the name Buddha out of it and all of the side points. But now let's look at, well, what's meditation then, or what's anapanasati? Anapanasati is actually the tool that we're going to use to get the mind fit for work so that we can see the Dhamma. To get the mind fit for work so that we can begin to understand the nature of suffering and how to come out of it. Because when the mind is in its normal state, it's subject to the suffering, and it's very, very hard to see a sewer when you're drowning in sewage. But if we can come out of the sewer, we can come out of the sewage long enough to begin to see this process. We can see the toilet, we can see the septic tank, we can see the outflow, we can see the whole 9 yards of it. And that's what we need to do, is to get above the suffering so that we can see how the sewage system works, so that we can make changes and modifications so that it doesn't keep getting backed up. It flows out, it's gone.
The overwhelming feeling I'm having well, you know what, I really shouldn't think this way. I'm having this feeling of like, oh, that's going to be really hard work. But I mean, I'm sure it will be at some times, but you know, the meditation I've been doing so far has been, I'm sure your students have mentioned, the mind illuminated.
Yes,
and that's been a pretty positive technique. Yeah.
But people make a lot of work out of it.
Right.
A lot of people struggle with it. Things, and then they say, I want that. And now they struggle trying to get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been learning to relax. I mean, I in general in life right now, I'm getting out of the mindset that it's really lovely to be doing the, you know, meditation, Buddhism, whatever, and recovery at the same time, because they go in tandem. They support each other.
They're actually the same thing.
Yes, they are. Thank you.
It's hard to say that the wheels of the locomotive on the right side of the track and the wheels on the left side of the track are in tandem without understanding that, wait a minute, there's a locomotive here. This is not a bunch of wheels running in tandem. There's a machine, a big one that's operating. There's something bigger going on.
I've been getting out of the mindset, just regarding the task orientation of the mind illuminated, because that comes up, and I've been a very task oriented person. And, of course, I'm at a point in my life where there are a lot of tasks I really like. For the sake of my life, I need to figure things out and I need to do certain things. But I've been trying to get out of the mindset of, that there's somewhere to get to.
Well,
That there's
okay,
some
let's
happy
look at it
place.
like this then. The new task is to stop having tasks. How are we going to do that? By recognizing that it's a task. And so we set it down. We don't do it. That it's much better just to sit here and take a deep breath and enjoy the moment than it is to solve any problem. That in fact, all the problems of life, all the tasks we give ourselves is quite useless. That people go from task to task to task to task and are still never satisfied.
Yeah.
That in fact, that moving from task to task to task is in fact the animal world that we live in. Doing things just to do it, going along to get along, staying in the herd because the herd mentality is safe. And it's dangerous to go it alone. So part of the practice then is to build fearlessness.
Fearlessness.
Yeah, to become fearless. If we are fearless, then we can have no task to do because we're not afraid of not doing the task.
So, I mean, this connects to what you were saying about the projector. I think of it in terms of stories. When I think about when fear is a story, and okay, sorry, I just lost the train here. Fearlessness. So, if I'm not not getting caught up in projecting into the future, then I have no fear. Anyway, I don't know where my brain was going with this. Fearlessness, tell me more.
Well, the Buddha was really big on fearlessness, and the biggest fear that we have is the fear of death.
Okay.
And
it's not my biggest fear.
Yes, it is. Certainly it is. Whatever fear you have, okay, think about the biggest fear you have. And while you're thinking about it, I'm coming into the room with a knife.
Right.
And my intention is to slit your throat.
Point taken.
Now all of a sudden the fear has changed now, hasn't it?
Point taken. Okay, interesting.
That in fact, the fear of death is the primary driver for everything, to the point that then we pick up secondary things and we think that the secondary things are the source of fear, but really the primary thing is self-preservation.
Okay.
So when you become fearless, that means that you're no longer trying to protect yourself. That in fact, you could say, instead of attaching to self-preservation, we attach ourselves to the truth. That being honest was more important than saving my own life, is a way of looking at it. Now, that can be done wisely or it can be done stupidly. And we'll talk about that at a later time, okay? I don't want to get into it because it'll take a while to describe what I'm talking about. But there have been occasions to where some quite world prominent people over the centuries have gotten killed for doing the right thing. Socrates would be an example, okay? So when we become dedicated to the truth, that means that now the truth is more important than the individual himself, and he's willing then to take the chances to be honest. But if he does it wisely, what that means is timing. An example of poor timing was when Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you Son of God?" And he answered wrongly because it was right, but it was inappropriate in the moment. And that is, "I am what you think I am," or "I am what you say I am," which was actually true in its own self. That whatever Jesus is in the moment, it's what Pontius Pilate thinks he is. But that was not the moment for correct philosophy. That's one of the reasons why he got nailed. But another reason he got nailed was because a week before that, he'd been in the temple throwing the money changers out, which was the right thing to do. But a wiser thing to do would to have been making good friends with the temple management so that we could explain to them why having the money changers in the temple was not a good idea, and then let the temple management run them out. That it wasn't Jesus' place, even though he did the right thing, he did it at the wrong time. So this is part of wisdom, then, is to not only become attached in the sense of wanting to tell the truth and being honest, but we have to time it well. And that was one of the qualities of the Buddha, that he was masterful in his timing.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things that we can talk about at a later time, exactly what I mean about his masterful timing. Because nowadays, teachers of the Dhamma are not nearly as masterful at the right teaching as the way that he was.
Teaching is something I want to do, so I'm something I'll pay attention to.
All right. Okay. So today is still kind of an introduction to it from the perspective of the Dhamma. So the next time you call, what we'll do is you'll actually start into the actual practice of Anapanasati, so that you can see how the Eightfold Noble Path and Anapanasati work together to get us into the state that we want to be in, not later, but right now.
Cool. Wonderful. Amazing.
That's the whole point, is to get ourselves out of suffering right now and into a state of pleasure right now. And we keep doing that over and over again until it becomes part of our nature. It becomes what we get used to doing. But most people, because they're task-oriented, they think they've got to do a task called meditation and later get the benefit from it. And so after 3,000 or maybe 30,000 hours of meditation of whatever variety, finally the karma machine waltzes into the meditation hall, slaps some Shaktipat on the meditator, and finally he's happy. That's what they're all expecting. If I work hard enough, or if I do this meditation, then I'll get the benefit from it. The answer is no. Not until he changes the way he's practicing. And when he starts to practice correctly, he gets the immediate benefit.
I'm a drug addict, so immediate gratification sounds great.
Immediate gratification. And so in that regard of, if the mind wanders away from the breath, the immediate gratification would be bringing the mind back to the breath, taking a deep breath, and becoming satisfied that you're able to clean the mind out. And we start practicing satisfaction right from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, that's also the technique in the Mind Illuminated, and I've really appreciated the other part of it.
Then why aren't the readers of that book doing what the book says?
Because they're human. Yeah.
Because you can't learn the Dhamma from a book is another way of saying it.
It really is a precious thing what you're doing here. I mean, I've had a few tingles up my spine when you've said something that I like I like surprises. In my recovery, my addiction was the same. It was the same day, and I don't even mean each day. Like it was just one long day. Um, and in my recovery, there have been surprises. Things have not the way that things have improved, and the suffering's been pretty predictable. But the way things have improved has surprised me. And I like surprises. So there's been some surprises in what I've heard today, and I associate. It's like that. It's like that line, um, all ocean tastes the salt. That taste. Surprises for me are the taste of freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes, the taste of freedom is everywhere. But going back to that point about the Dhamma cannot be learned from books, here's a really clear, easy example of that. That the Gutenberg Bible hails from the 15th century. Or no, the 14th century. It's been around that long. People have been reading the Bible for 500 years now. Show me a good Christian who's read that book and become like Jesus. Not one of them. Christianity did not learn to be Jesus-like by reading a book. The same thing is true about Buddhist books. No one gets Buddhism out of a Buddhist book. It has to be transmitted. It has to be transmitted by a teacher. Here's part of the reason that works that way. There is very rarely going to be a book that someplace down on page 98, you'll find a paragraph saying, why are you reading this? You should go back and read page 2.
Okay.
And the book's not going to say that. The book is following the mind of the guy who wrote the book. But a one-on-one teacher is going to be able to look at what you're doing and respond to the student in this moment.
Yeah.
Okay. An example of that is very, very, very rarely for a person to learn to play the piano without a teacher. Even if all he got from the teacher was watching the teacher play. But if a kid never saw anybody play the piano and never had any teaching about the piano, the likelihood of him learning to play the piano was zip, no matter how many music books he buys.
You may want to revise that one metaphor, because I am a self-taught instrumentalist.
And did you ever see someone who played that instrument before you?
Most
You
likely.
never watched anybody, you never saw a video, you never heard any music, all you ever got was a guitar.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with that stuff around, sure.
Sure, exactly. That's what we're getting at. Okay. So if you never heard any music played, but you only had a music book, and that book was 500 years and 10,000, maybe 10 million people were reading that book, but none of them were ever playing any music.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Yes, one flounders. Yeah.
One flounder.
A person will flounder. They'll get lost in blind alleys and eddies, and that kind of stuff.
Especially he follows the people that he knows and trusts into those blind alleys and eddies.
Right.
Through a herd mentality.
So, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting aspect of Buddhism, is that whole self-exploration, like be a lamp unto yourself thing, decide for yourself. And one of the reasons that I have been attracted to it has been like, I come from a very atheist background. Thank God that when I was just feeling open-minded and sat.
An atheist who's thanking God. Yes, I hear that.
I heard. Yeah. Oh, I'm in recovery, so we deal with God a lot. And I see maybe one time if we get to know each other well enough, we could chew the fat.
I chew the fat with
God
all
is
of
so
my
much.
friends. That's the whole point of this, is getting you so steeped in the Dhamma that we can have good, deep conversations about your life.
I'd love that. I'd love that more than anything.
Well, that's what this is about. It's actually a relationship between a teacher and a student. And I was lucky enough to have more than one teacher like that.
I will make good on this. I want to help people. I want to help people with this. I want to teach it.
Good. But you've got to learn it first.
Yeah.
And once you know it and you've got it deeply, then you can share it.
Like when you talk about this, your teacher said this is the time for the Noble Dhamma to come out. I just have this inkling that, we can. There's two things, that we can want less, be happy with what we have, and come together. And I just want to make that happen. Try. I want to try.
Let me say this then.
Yeah.
That desire that you're talking about will frustrate the hell out of you until you give it up. You cannot save the world. All you can do is gain a few friends.
I can try.
Yes, and you will be miserable in your failure at it.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about it in the sense of leaving the world. Don't try to fix it. There is a Dhammapada passage that goes like this: to avoid evil, to do good, and to purify the mind. So where most people have the idea, oh, there's a task to be done. There's evil out there that needs to be conquered. No, it doesn't. Evil is to be avoided, especially in one's own mind. And when you're out there avoiding evil in an excellent way, people stop trying to beat evil to death and learn to smile with you. The world doesn't need to be fixed. The world needs to be abandoned. An example of that is you don't, in your living condition, you don't have a kitchen. But imagine that you do, and you've been in other kitchens before, and what do people do in a kitchen with their trash?
In the garbage can.
They take it out.
Yeah, okay.
They take it out. Yeah. Okay? That's what we're going to do. In other words, they avoid it. They take their trash out. They don't decorate their walls with it.
Okay.
Okay? And yet, the world, we decorate our walls, our mental walls, with all of the trash of the world, trying to fix it. Look how many people are trying to fix Donald Trump. The news is full of people trying to fix Donald Trump. Best thing to do is just to avoid it, to stay away from it, stay away from government, to stay away from the world.
But you're actively doing something to improve the world. You're putting yourself out there. You're devoting yourself to this. I mean, how does that fit in?
No, I'm just having conversations with friends that call. I'm not trying to solve the world. If anything, I've already accomplished any goals that I would have had. In fact, the the first 30 or 40 videos would be enough, but now there's more than 400. But sometimes I have students who call that we don't record it.
Yeah.
And so I've got some students that have called 60 times in the past 3 or 4 years and never got a video on, and that's okay. I'm not trying to solve the world's problems. Ajahn Po asked me to introduce the Noble Dhamma, the supramundane Dhamma, on the internet, and that's what I've done.
So what is life after, you said you've accomplished all your goals, like when one becomes satisfied, because I mean, I'm also leery of the term enlightenment, as I heard you are. One becomes satisfied. What's life like after that? You know, like you just.
What do you want it to be?
Pardon?
What do you want it to be?
Well, like I said, I mean, I want to stay helping.
Okay. Then you have not become satisfied. You want to help other people.
Yeah.
The way that I would look at it is that I get a big kick out of it when students begin to really understand the Dhamma.
Yeah.
That's really a hit, a joyous moment to see students really get it.
Right.
Okay, so but that's just an extra bonus. But I'm not trying to create that. Just being friends. That's all that really there is anyway. That's what the Sangha is all about, is friendship. And we'll talk more about that, but this is the Buddha had actually said that the practice of his teaching is all about friendship, 100%. If you can learn to become friends with everything, then you've got no problems at all. Don't make enemies. You've got no enemies. You've got no task to be done. In other words, you become friends with that undone task.
Okay, Dhammarato, I think my brain is full.
The whole path is becoming friends with yourself, with others, with the world, with all of your problems, everything. And then there's nothing left to do. So you can sit down and enjoy your moment. No place to go, nothing to do. Everything is friendly. Everything is sabai. That's a Pali or Thai word. It means everything is cool. Everything is nirvana.
Okay, well, I think make friends with it is a good kind of task to leave with myself. I said it before, I'll keep saying it. This is out of this world. I'm so happy that you do this.
That's a good way of talking about it. Out of this world. That's exactly what it means in the Pali is loka tara.
Yeah.
That is translated as transcendent and is translated as supramundane. But your word for it is the best one of all. It's just out of this world.
In 12 steps, they talk about you're about to be rocketed into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. And I think it's in the same vein. You have an excellent day. I'll talk to you. I got to balance the different things in my life, but I'm sooner rather than later.
All right. The next couple of days will be fine.
I'd like that. It'll happen, no doubt. Yeah.
All right, Devon. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.